The rain never really stopped in Black Hollow. It just changed density, sometimes drizzle, sometimes mist, sometimes a steady percussion that felt like the sky was tapping its fingers, waiting for something to give. When I crossed the "Welcome to Black Hollow" sign that first night, it wasn't the rain that bothered me. It was how the forest leaned in, like it wanted to read the license plate. Mom used to joke that the McAllister cabin was where trees came to die twice, once by the saw, and again by the silence. She was half right. The place sat 20 miles off the main road, accessible by a logging trail, so eroded it felt like driving across bones. By the time I reached the property gate, my windshield wipers had given up, and the GPS insisted I was floating somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. The cabin rose out of the fog like an accusation, to stories of weather-blackened timber, a porch sagging under moss and memory. The lights were already on. My grandfather never slept before midnight. He met me on the porch, wearing the same flannel he'd probably owned since the Cold War. His beard was mostly grey now, his eyes still the color of gun oil. "Cole," he said, voice like sandpaper on oak. "Hell of a drive." "More like a baptism," I answered. He smiled. That half-crooked grin I used to think could scare away anything. Now it just made the lines around his mouth look deeper. Inside, the cabin smelled like coffee and iodine. Tools everywhere, scalpels, clamps, a row of surgical lights repurposed as reading lamps. The kitchen table was covered in medical journals, half-dismantled rifles, and a box of deer bones labeled practice joint reconstructions. He poured 2 mugs and sat without asking if I wanted sugar. In his world, you took it black or you didn't deserve to drink it. We talked about the accident. Or rather, we avoided it. My parents' SUV had been reduced to molten aluminum on I-5 2 weeks earlier. The coroner said they died instantly, which I didn't believe. Nobody dies instantly. There's always a breath, a flicker of awareness, a last thought that nobody hears. I should have been there. I replayed that truth in my head until it stopped sounding like grief and started sounding like arithmetic. "You staying long?" Elijah asked. "Long enough to sort their things. Maybe fix the roof." He nodded but didn't look at me. "You'll want to stay clear of the West Woods. Coyote's been acting wrong lately." "What's wrong?" He shrugged. "Listening too much." After dinner, I wandered upstairs to the old guest room. The floorboards creaked in a rhythm that reminded me of a heartbeat. Out the window, the tree line swayed in one continuous motion, though the wind was dead still. I unpacked my drone, the one indulgence I allowed myself after leaving the army. Custom-built, infrared sensors, night vision gimbal, long-range comms. If I couldn't sleep, I could at least map the property. Elijah went to bed around midnight. I waited another hour before stepping outside. The fog had thickened into something tactile, a curtain that brushed against my skin. I launched the drone from the porch and watched the live feed on my tablet. The house shrank into a dim rectangle. Beyond it, the woods spread like a bruise under the moonlight. The feed flickered as I moved deeper into the forest. Static washed over the screen for a moment, then cleared to reveal a faint heat signature, human-shaped, about half a mile out. My first thought was poacher. Second thought, occult scavenger. Black Hollow had its share of both. I zoomed in. The figure was dragging something heavy, limp. A tarp maybe. Or a body. I switched to thermal. The shape being dragged was warm. Alive or freshly dead. My pulse quickened, that old medic's instinct waking up like an animal from hibernation. Then the camera caught the glint of a metal bumper, a lifted Silverado parked in the trees. My grandfather's truck. I froze. For a long minute I couldn't move the controls. The feed showed Elijah, backlit by his own headlights, hauling the body into the dark. He moved with slow, deliberate strength, not the shuffle of a 76-year-old man but the precision of someone used to carrying corpses. The figure he dragged, a woman, from the outline, kicked once, weakly. He struck her across the temple. She went still. My breath fogged the scream. I tried to rationalize. Maybe he'd found a trespasser. Maybe it was self-defense. But he wasn't calling the police. He wasn't even looking around. He just disappeared into the trees, dragging her by the ankles. The drone feed cut to black. I ran. Didn't think, just sprinted across the field, flashlight bouncing, mud sucking at my boots. The forest swallowed me almost instantly. I called his name once, Grandpa. And the echo came back smaller. Somewhere ahead, branches snapped, slow and methodical. Then a light, his headlamp, swaying. When I broke into the clearing, the Silverado was empty. The ground was disturbed, a furrow of wet leaves leading toward a stand of firs. My flashlight caught something half buried near the truck, duct tape, still sticky, wrapped around a clump of blonde hair. I picked it up, stared, and dropped it. The tape made a soft sound, like skin peeling off skin. I didn't sleep. Back at the cabin, I locked the door and watched the woods until dawn. Elijah didn't return until the sun had burned the fog into silver vapor. He came in through the back, covered in mud up to his knees. Up early, he asked, like it was any other morning. Couldn't sleep. Dreams again? Something like that. He poured himself coffee, didn't wash his hands. His fingernails were rimmed with something dark. I wanted to ask, but the words stuck. He noticed my drone controller on the counter. You still playing with that thing? Yeah. He smiled faintly. Careful where you fly it. These woods have a way of taking back what doesn't belong. That was the moment I knew he'd seen it. Somehow, he'd known I was watching. By noon, I'd packed my bags. Told myself I'd leave for Portland, call the sheriff, let professionals handle whatever nightmare my family had rotted into. But guilt is a stubborn parasite. I couldn't drive away without knowing the truth. Not after everything this bloodline had already buried. So I waited until he took his afternoon nap in the recliner, snoring softly under the drone of the old refrigerator. Then I slipped into the kitchen, took the Glock from the drawer he thought I didn't know about, and chambered around. My hands didn't shake. I guess some parts of soldier never fade. When he woke, I was sitting across from him at the table. The gun rested between us, pointed at his chest. He blinked once, then looked at it, then at me. Guess you saw something you shouldn't have, he said. I saw enough. He exhaled slowly, rubbed his jaw. Then I suppose we'd better have ourselves a talk. I thought he'd fight, or lie, or beg. Instead, he reached for a roll of duct tape on the counter, tore a strip, and wrapped it around his own wrists. Tight. Then he looked at me, steady, unafraid. Go on, he said. Tape me to the chair. You'll want to hear this right. He didn't resist when I tightened the tape. His wrists were roped to the arms of the kitchen chair, ankles cinched to the legs. The roll clattered on the floor, echoing like a gunshot in the quiet house. Elijah McAllister, once the best trauma surgeon in Oregon, sat bound in his own kitchen, eyes fixed on me with the calm of a man reading his own autopsy report. Talk, I said. He nodded once, as if this had been waiting years for someone to ask. You ever hear your grandmother scream, Cole? The question hit harder than the pistol weight in my hand. She died before I was born. Yeah, he said. And she's been dying every day since. He leaned back as far as the tape allowed, gaze drifting toward the window where fog pressed against the glass like something breathing. It was 89, he began. Storm season. Lydia had been helping out at the hospital, volunteer work, mostly. We had a new orthopedic guy, name of Victor Kane. Charmer. Good hands. The kind that could rebuild a wrist like clockwork and still light your cigarette without shaking. Lydia said he was brilliant. I said brilliance is just a fancy word for hungry. He paused, lips tightening. 2 months later, she didn't come home. I wanted to interrupt, to ask what any of this had to do with the woman in the woods, but his voice had that surgical rhythm, slow, precise, scalpel through tissue. They found her car off County Road 17. Door open, headlights on, purse untouched. Only thing missing was her wedding ring. Sheriff Dunley figured Drifter. I figured Kane. But when we searched his place, he was gone. Vanished like steam. What we did find, he gestured with his bound hands. Looked like an operating theater built by a goddamn entomologist. He let that hang there. Insects. I said. Not exactly. Something studying how skin folds, how bones hinge. There were drawings. Layers of people peeled back like onions. Every sheet signed with a symbol, looked like a claw wrapped around the circle. The order. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first trace of them. He went on. A week later, a body turned up downriver. Or what was left of one. Tissue liquefied, bones stretched like pulled toffee, hair still perfect. Dental confirmed it was Lydia. But there was no trauma, no blade, no burn. Just absence. Like she'd been unzipped. He shut his eyes for a moment. I quit the hospital that night. Started my own autopsy. His voice hardened. Blood doesn't lie. I pulled samples from Lydia's remains, what little they gave back. DNA matched her, but there was something else, a second genome threaded through hers like barbed wire. Alien, but not alien. Human rewritten. He looked at me then, and I saw a flicker of fear, real, ancient fear. I thought it was a contamination error. Then I found the same sequence in Kane's patient files. Hundreds of them. He'd been injecting people. Transfusions. Trial runs. And you didn't call the feds? He smiled thinly. Son, when you find hell under a microscope, you don't call anyone. You dig deeper. He told me about the months that followed, the nights he broke into blood banks, the samples he stole, the men he followed down logging roads that ended in pits full of bones. And the truck. The modified logging rig that doubled as a mobile ore. I caught him on a switchback near Mount Hebo, Elijah said. He tried to run me off the road. Didn't realize I'd reinforced the frame. When his van flipped, I dragged him out. Thought I'd get justice. Thought I'd kill him like a man. What happened? I asked. His eyes darkened. He smiled. Even with half his ribs sticking out, he smiled and said, "You've already joined us." Then he tore his own skin open. I didn't breathe. He wasn't lying. His tone didn't allow it. What came out wasn't human. 7 feet of chitin and tendon. Smelled like rust and ozone. I emptied a shotgun into it, nothing. So I crushed its head under the truck door. black blood everywhere. Some of it got in my mouth. He swallowed, eyes fixed on the table. That's when I felt it. The pulse. Like another heartbeat inside mine. I could see in the dark, hear the forest breathing. Pain didn't register anymore. But there was more. I could sense them, the others. The hollows. He said the word like a curse. They're not demons, not aliens. They're surgeons who went too far. The Order calls them angels, the next evolution. I call them infection in a white coat. I lowered the gun a little, though I didn't trust my hands. And the woman last night? You operating on her too? He shook his head. Not operating. Containing. She was one of them. I wanted to scream bullshit, but something in his eyes made me stop. That same haunted shimmer I'd seen in soldiers who would stared too long into aftermaths. She was half-turned, he said quietly. Still looked human, mostly. But her organs had started to rearrange. You don't kill something like that in daylight. So you murdered her in the woods. I gave her mercy before the thing inside finished the job. He exhaled and looked past me, to the family photographs lining the mantel, Lydia's smile, my parents' wedding, me in a graduation cap that already looked borrowed. You think this curse started with me? It didn't. The Order's been pruning our family tree since the first McAllister cut into human flesh. We were healers once. Now we are petri dishes. Silence settled like dust. Only the clock ticked, each second a drop of something heavy. Finally, he spoke again, softer. You are different, Cole. You've got my blood, but it's clean. Untouched. I kept you out of this for a reason. I wanted to believe him. But the image of the woman's limp body wouldn't leave me. Then why keep the tapes? Why the basement lab, the guns, the files labeled subjects? Because I'm running out of time, he said. And when I go, you'll need to know how to finish what I started. He nodded toward the pantry door. There's a safe behind the flour tins. Keys in my left boot. You'll find a drive. Open it. I hesitated, but my curiosity moved faster than caution. The safe clicked open with a heavy turn. Inside, a portable SSD, wrapped in gauze. I plugged it into my laptop. Folders bloomed, timestamps, patient codes, autopsy images, each file colder than the last. One folder stood out, Lydia_sequence. Another, seed_extraction_protocol.pdf. What is this? Blueprints, he said. For the thing growing in my head. I stared. You're infected? Dormant stage, he admitted. 6 years now. Keeps quiet as long as I feed it the blood of its own kind. But lately, it's been whispering. He tilted his head, as if listening to something just beyond hearing. That's why I needed you here. Raj Parikh's coming in 2 days. We'll cut it out together. After that, you burn everything, files, samples, me if you have to. He met my eyes. Promise me, Cole. I should have walked out. Should have handed him to the sheriff, or the CDC, or whatever ghost department handled surgical nightmares. But the way he said me if you have to twisted something in my chest. The man who taught me to suture my first wound, to set a broken arm in a storm, was asking for a death sentence, and trusting me to pull the trigger. I can't promise that, I said. He smiled, sad and proud. Then you are already half one of us. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. Somewhere deep in the woods, a sound rose, a metallic cry, like sheet metal bending under pressure. Elijah froze. "You hear that?" he whispered. I nodded. "That's them," he said. "They know you are awake now." The power flickered. The kitchen light pulsed twice, then steadied. My heart hammered. What the hell does that mean? He looked at me, eyes reflecting something faintly luminous. "It means our bloodline's been found. I used to think trauma surgeons were the most rational men alive, scientists with steel in their veins. Listening to my grandfather that morning shattered that illusion like a ribcage under pressure." His story unfolded over black coffee and the steady tick of rain, half confession, half anatomy lecture in madness. He said it began in Portland General, 1989, when the hospital ran its own video logs on VHS. Every oar was wired for malpractice protection. That's where he'd first met Victor Kane, the orthopedic prodigy with movie star cheekbones and a handshake that lingered a beat too long. Elijah's voice slowed as he recalled the night of the incident. "They paged me for a consult in trauma too," he said. Kane was already scrubbed in. Patient was a logger, compound fracture, arm turned to pulp. I swear to God, Cole, the man should have bled out on the table. But Kane, he hummed while he worked. Not a tune I recognized. Low, rhythmic. And when he touched the bone, it moved for him. He described how the bone fibers flexed like muscle under Kane's gloved fingers, how the fracture fused before the sutures were tied. When he finished, he looked straight at the camera lens and smiled, like he knew somebody was watching. After that, Elijah couldn't stop watching the tapes. Kane's post-OPS healed in record time. His blood work showed strange enzymes, hemoglobin binding with metals, like mercury and iron. When Elijah tried to report it, the lab results vanished. The department head called it clerical error. 2 days later, Lydia went missing. The flashback burned in my imagination. The rain, the overturned car, my grandfather kneeling in the mud while emergency lights painted the trees red and blue. "They called it an animal attack," he muttered. They weren't wrong. Just not the kind that walks on 4 legs. He spent the next 6 months reconstructing the case himself. Every sleepless night, he poured through medical waste logs and delivery receipts until he found Kane's storage unit outside Salem. Inside were human-sized cocoons, thick resin sacks filled with fluid the color of old pennies. He burned them, but not before one ruptured and spilled a half-formed hand onto the concrete, nails fused into black talons. He hunted Kane across the coast for weeks. When he finally cornered him on that icy mountain pass, it wasn't vengeance that kept him alive. It was fascination. "I had to know what he'd become," Elijah said. "Science is just curiosity with sharper teeth." He showed me the scar on his neck, the point where Kane's black blood had entered him. "First it burned," he said. "Then everything became too clear. Sound. Smell. Time itself. I could feel molecules settle. The world turned into a diagram. For a month he thought he was losing his mind. But when another hollow came sniffing for Kane's remains, Elijah felt it before he saw it. The psychic pulse guided him straight to the creature. He killed that one with a fire axe, then realized he could sense others hundreds of miles away. That was when he bought Iron Pine Medical, the abandoned clinic off Highway 20. Officially, it was for research. Unofficially, it was his bunker, his monastery, his hunting lodge. He sealed the lower levels in lead mesh, lined the walls with Faraday cages, and turned the morgue into a forge. He built weapons from the only things the hollows feared, cold iron and heat. The tour of his mind ended there. The rest I saw with my own eyes later that day. I followed him down the basement stairs after noon, past racks of canning jars filled with preserved tissue. A single halogen lamp buzzed above the workbench, illuminating a cathedral of tools. Some surgical, some military. All handmade. "Welcome to the real inheritance," he said. The air reeked of solvent and ozone. Rows of labeled cases lined the wall, osmium slugs, thermite gel, silver nitrate injectors. He moved like a curator, opening each box as if unveiling art. "This is for disabling tendons," he said, showing a baton tipped with magnetized ironwood. "They can't stand the cold trace. Burns them like acid." Another case held vials of thick, dark liquid. "Hollow blood," I guessed. He nodded. "Collected from kills. Keeps me stable. For you, it's poison." I tried to laugh but couldn't. "You realize how insane this sounds?" "Insanity's just survival without an audience," he said. He handed me a rifle I'd only seen in video games, an AR-15 chambered for .50 Beowulf, custom upper, short barrel, recoil buffer the size of a soda can. The magazine gleamed dull grey. "Osmium cores," he said. "Heavy enough to punch through carapace." I lifted it. The weight felt honest. "You planning to start a war?" "It already started," he replied. "We just stopped reporting casualties." He set up a makeshift range behind the barn, hay bales stacked against rusted sheet metal. I spent the afternoon learning how to shoot again, how to move without telegraphing breath. Every time I pulled the trigger, the recoil whispered something ancient in my bones. Between drills he spoke in fragments, like memories leaking from an open wound. "I had to test my limits," he said. "Ran blood work every week. Found the genome expanding, slow, deliberate, like coral. If I stopped drinking hollow blood, my cells started to rearrange. Nerves became fibers. Teeth thickened. 6 years ago, I saw it in an MRI, a mass blooming near my frontal lobe. The seed. That's what Cain left behind." He touched the side of his head gently, the way priests touch relics. Raj Parekh was the only surgeon I trusted. He built this place's lower theater, the one under the garage. He said he'd cut it out when the time came. "And now it's time," I said. "Before it speaks louder than me," he answered. He led me to the far end of the bunker, a blast door with 3 locks. Inside was a surgical suite cleaner than any hospital I'd seen, stainless tables, oxygen tanks, suction lines, a ceiling-mounted camera rig. The walls were mirrored with tempered glass. Behind one panel sat an incinerator stack disguised as a furnace. "This is where we take the seed out," he said. "If it goes wrong, you torch the room. Everything. Including me." I looked at him. "You built your own crematorium. Every good surgeon plans for complications." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch with the rifle across my lap, staring into the fog while cicadas droned like broken clocks. Somewhere out there, something moved. Not loud, just a shift in rhythm. Branches exhaling. Leaves realigning. My skin prickled. Through the mist, a figure stepped into view at the tree line, tall, narrow, its joints too long for symmetry. I raised the scope. The creature's body shimmered with faint bioluminescence, like veins of molten copper under skin. It tilted its head as if studying me, then vanished backward into the woods with liquid grace. I didn't breathe until I heard the cabin door creak behind me. Elijah stood there, shotgun in hand, eyes half glowing. "They're testing the perimeter," he said quietly. "Sensing the blood." "Mine or yours?" "Doesn't matter," he said. "Same scent." He stepped beside me, gaze fixed on the dark horizon. "You wanted to know who we are, Cole?" We are the firewall. Everything past this tree line is infection. The wind carried the smell of pine and ozone again. A low hum vibrated the air, like distant generators. They're close, I whispered. He nodded. Good. Let them come. Tomorrow, you start learning what makes them bleed. I heard the van before I saw it, diesel engine coughing its way up the gravel road like something dying slow. It was nearly midnight, and fog had turned the valley into a ball of smoke. Headlights cut to thin tunnels through the trees, stopping just short of the barn. Raj Parekh stepped out first. Time hadn't been kind to him. His hair was silver now, scalp shining through. He wore hospital scrubs under a raincoat, hands tucked into his pockets as if he still feared contamination. Behind him, a young woman in a black hoodie unloaded a metal case. She moved with surgical precision, chin down, eyes hidden. Elijah greeted him like a ghost he'd been expecting. 6 years, Raj said, his accent softened by distance. You look worse. Elijah grinned. You'll look the same once you start bleeding my blood. They hugged, quick and hollow. The girl stayed back, watching. Your assistant? Elijah asked. Raj hesitated. My daughter. Gabrielle. The name felt wrong in the air. She glanced at me once, long enough for me to notice the faint scar running from her jaw to her ear, a pale thread that looked almost surgical. We moved down into the bunker. The hum of generators replaced the outside world. Inside the surgical suite, stainless steel reflected our faces in warped fragments. Raj unpacked the case, scalpels, clamps, retractors, a drill for cranial access. He worked in silence, every motion rehearsed. Elijah stripped to the waist and lay back on the table. His skin looked translucent in the cold light, veins pulsing dark like rivers beneath ice. You are sure about this? Raj asked. I've been sure for 30 years, Elijah said. Just don't flinch when it screams. Raj frowned. When what screams? You'll know. He nodded toward me. Cole, prep the line. My hands moved automatically, 4 catheter into the forearm, saline flush, monitor leads on chest. I'd done this 1,000 times in combat hospitals, but never for family. Never for someone who called hell a diagnosis. Raj injected local anesthetic and began the incision. The sound of the scalpel parting skin was almost polite, a wet zipper. Elijah didn't even blink. Bone saw, Raj said quietly. The saw whined to life, biting through skull with the steady vibration of a chainsaw heard from another room. A ring of bone lifted free like the lid of a jar. Beneath it, the dura shimmered translucent, pulsing with each heartbeat. Jesus, I whispered. There's movement. Something rippled under the membrane, slow and deliberate, as if aware of being exposed. Raj froze mid-motion. Elijah, he whispered, it's alive. Of course it is, Elijah said calmly. That's why you are here. Raj hesitated too long. The thing twitched, tiny filaments of black tissue probing upward, tasting air. Cut it, Elijah hissed. Now. Raj lifted the scalpel, but Gabrielle, Sister Seraph, though I didn't know that name yet, stepped forward. Father, she said softly, don't. Her voice was wrong. Too even, too measured. Elijah's eyes snapped open. She's one of them, he rasped. Before I could react, she drove a syringe into Raj's neck. He convulsed once, dropping the scalpel. The incision gaped wider, and the thing beneath the skull bloomed, thin tendrils wrapping around the edges like roots finding soil. I grabbed her wrist, twisting hard, but she moved faster than any human should, spinning, slamming me into the tray table. Instruments clattered across the floor. Her eyes caught the light, glowing faint umber. "Your family carries the seed," she whispered. "You were meant to be shepherds, not hunters." She lunged. I swung the ironwood baton Elijah had forged earlier, catching her across the ribs. The impact hissed, smoke rose where iron met flesh. She screamed, voice splitting into two tones. Raj gasped on the floor, eyes rolling. "G. Gabriel. Stay down!" I shouted. Elijah struggled upright, blood running down his temples. The tendrils from his skull writhed, reaching for the light. He grabbed the cautery wand and jammed it into the incision. The smell of burning meat filled the room. The thing inside him shrieked through his mouth. The sound wasn't human, it rattled the glass, flickered the lights, made my vision strobe. Gabrielle staggered back, clutching her head, screaming in harmony. "Cole!" Elijah roared. "Burn the drive, everything." I looked toward the monitor bank. The external hard drive, the one with Lydia_sequence, blinked steady blue. I pulled my pistol, fired 3 rounds into it. Sparks erupted, smoke curling from the ports. Gabrielle recovered fast. She lunged again, but Elijah caught her by the throat with both hands, black blood running down his forearms. "You tell your order," he growled, "this family doesn't kneel." He slammed her head against the surgical table. Once. Twice. The third time cracked bone. She went limp. Raj tried to crawl toward her, leaving a slick trail. "Please, she's my daughter." Elijah didn't answer. He pressed the cautery wand to Raj's neck. The hiss drowned the begging. When it was over, the only sound left was the slow tick of cooling metal. Elijah sagged against the table, panting. "We have to go," he muttered. "Others will come." I stared at him, at the smoking wound, at the fragments of bone glistening under the lamp. "You just killed them." He wiped his mouth. "No, Cole. I survived them." The bunker smelled of ozone and formalin and something older, like iron in rain. I helped him to his feet. His eyes were no longer grey but a pale, feral gold. "We'll burn it," I said. He nodded. "After we collect what's left." He tore open Gabrielle's chest with bare hands, searching with surgeon's precision until he found a black crystalline node pulsing near her sternum. He lifted it with forceps, trembling. "The seed," he whispered. "Each hollow carries one. It's how they reproduce." "Destroy it," I said. "Not yet." He slipped it into a vial of formaldehyde. "I need to compare it to mine." I wanted to argue, but exhaustion crushed everything. We sealed the corpses in biohazard tarps, doused the room in ethanol, and lit the match. The flames crawled up the walls with airy patience, licking at the mirrored glass until the reflection fractured. Outside, the night had gone silent. Even the crickets had retreated. The smoke rose straight up into the fog, disappearing as if the sky itself swallowed evidence. Elijah stood beside me, bandaged, shaking. "Raj was weak," he said. "But his daughter, she was proof they can be bred." "Jesus, Grandpa." "Don't say that name," he snapped. "No God watches this place." He turned toward the woods. "We'll move base tomorrow. The motel still has rooms that burn clean." I didn't understand then. The plan. The rage. The inevitability. I just nodded and watched the bunker collapse into itself, sparks flickering through smoke like dying fireflies. Hours later, I found him in the truck, staring at the vial. The seed pulsed faintly, synchronized with his heartbeat. What happens if you stop fighting it? I asked. He didn't look at me. Then I remember what it felt like to be Cain. He started the engine. Sleep if you can, Cole. Tomorrow we finish this. I leaned against the window, the rumble of the road dull beneath my skull. The seed glowed in the jar between us like a miniature sun, painting the cab in veins of red light. Somewhere inside that rhythm, I thought I heard a whisper, faint, deliberate, speaking my name. Cole. We left Iron Pine Medical before dawn. The fire behind us burned slow and deliberate, like it knew it was cleaning a wound. Elijah didn't speak during the drive, just stared at the road, knuckles white on the steering wheel. The vial sat in the cup holder between us, faintly luminous, pulsing to the rhythm of the truck's diesel idle. Every time it throbbed, the cabin lights dimmed, as if the seed were drawing power from everything around it. Fog swallowed the forest in rolling sheets. The road ahead looked less like asphalt and more like an artery. I remember thinking the world itself felt organic, alive in ways it shouldn't be. Elijah finally broke the silence. They'll come for it, he said. The seed doesn't like being alone. I glanced at the vial. Then why keep it? Because knowledge is leverage. And leverage buys time. We stopped for fuel outside a shuttered logging depot. The pumps were dead, power lines sagged like spider silk. While Elijah siphoned from a maintenance truck, I stretched, trying to ignore the static growling at the base of my skull. The whisper I'd heard the night before, soft, deliberate, hadn't left. It rode every heartbeat, forming words just beyond language. He's fading. When we reached the cabin again, daylight had turned the fog to milk. Elijah's steps were slower now. His skin shimmered faintly, like oil on water. He kept rubbing his temples, muttering half sentences about resonance, about threshold voltage. I pretended not to notice, because admitting it meant admitting he was losing the war inside his skull. He went straight to the basement and locked himself in. I sat at the kitchen table, watching dust drift through sunlight, and tried to remember the last time this house had felt human. Maybe never. Hours passed. Then the generator kicked on. I followed the noise, calling his name. Don't come down, he shouted through the door. If it talks, ignore it. The warning chilled me more than anything. I waited. Listened. Then I heard it, two voices, overlapping, Elijah's deep growl and something underneath it, insect smooth and patient. They argued in perfect rhythm, sharing one throat. You can't excise the divine. You are not divine, you are infection. Infection is the beginning of design. Metal clattered, glass shattered, and then silence. When he opened the door an hour later, he looked decades older. Sweat soaked his shirt. His eyes burned faintly gold. It's adapting, he said, voice trembling. The surgery bought time. That's all. I helped him upstairs. His pulse was erratic, skipping beats like a bad record. You need a hospital, I said. He laughed weakly. Hospitals make them. That night, I found him in the study, writing equations on the wall in Sharpie, spirals of numbers and Latin fragments. Carum sanguinum, the deer blood. Vectorum lucis, the carriers of light. His handwriting wavered, looping between human and something jagged. I filmed it on my phone. I don't know why, proof, maybe, or a future confession. Around 3 a.m., he called me downstairs again. Look at this. On the workbench lay a dissected squirrel. Its chest cavity glowed faintly umber. I didn't do this, he said. found it outside the porch. The seed inside it pulsed identical to his own. "They're propagating," I whispered. He nodded. "The infection isn't contagious, it's communicative. The seeds broadcast instructions. I can hear them now, clear as thought." He lifted his head suddenly, nostrils flaring. "They're close. 4, maybe 5. Coming from the creek." We armed up, rifle, batons, flares. My hands moved without hesitation. The training he drilled into me finally made sense. This was no longer about belief. It was about survival. Outside, the air tasted metallic. The moon hid behind cloud. I scanned the tree line with night vision, 5 figures, moving in unison. Too smooth. Too tall. "Don't shoot till you see the eyes," Elijah whispered. They stepped into view, human silhouettes draped in burlap robes, each wearing a bone mask carved to resemble an open jaw. The order. Their torches hissed blue. "Give us the relic," one called. Voice feminine, steady. Elijah raised his shotgun. "You'll get it the same way you got Cain's, through fire." They charged. The first torch hit the porch railing, igniting old varnish. I opened fire, 3 rounds, 2 bodies dropping before they touched ground. The third reached Elijah and swung a machete. He blocked with the shotgun, pivoted, and smashed the man's skull with the stock. A 4th attacker leapt from the shadows, slashing my arm. The blade glanced off bone, but the pain came later. First came the whisper. The seed recognized blood. My blood. It spoke again, open. I felt heat surge through my chest, a pressure behind my eyes. The wound sealed itself in seconds, skin knitting with soft pops. Elijah saw it and froze. "Cole, what did you?" Before he could finish, the 5th cultist drove a knife into his side. He turned, fired point blank, vaporizing the attacker's head, but the damage was done. Blood bubbled at his lips. We stumbled back into the cabin, barricading the door with a table. The flames outside reflected in the window, turning the glass into a screen of fire. He collapsed onto the floor. "It's in you now?" he gasped. "No," I said. "I'm fine." He grabbed my wrist, iron grip despite the blood loss. "Listen. The blood you drank at the bunker, it carried fragments. They're waking." He coughed, crimson flecking his beard. "You have 2 choices. Kill me before it takes me, or help me finish what's coming." "What's coming?" He smiled weakly. "Harvest." Outside, more footsteps approached, heavy, deliberate. Through the flames I saw a shape larger than the rest, its skin glinting like polished obsidian. A hollow. Elijah tried to stand but fell back, trembling. The seed wants reunion. He fumbled with the vial, handed it to me. "If I lose control, shoot through this." Then the wall exploded inward. Splinters and fire swept the room. The hollow stepped through, 7 feet of armor and sinew, eyes like molten gold. It looked at me, then at Elijah, tilting its head with airy familiarity. Elijah lifted the shotgun. "Hello again, Cain." The creature shrieked, sound rattling the boards. I fired the Beowulf, 3 osmium rounds. The first 2 ricocheted. The third tore through its shoulder, spraying black mist. It lunged anyway, claws slicing air where my face had been. Elijah threw a thermite charge. It stuck to the creature's chest and ignited white. The hollow staggered, screaming, skin cracking like ceramic. Elijah collapsed beside it, both burning in the same light. "Go!" he shouted. I dragged him toward the back door as the ceiling caught fire. The air filled with cinders and the stench of molten bone. We stumbled into the night. Behind us, the cabin roared, a pyre consuming generations. He fell to his knees near the truck, clutching his side. His blood glowed faintly under the moon. Too late, he whispered. It's awake. His eyes rolled back, gold overtaking grey. The veins in his neck bulged, pulsing with amber light. I pointed the gun at his chest, hands shaking. Don't make me do this, I said. He smiled, a terrible, peaceful smile. Then it wins. I hesitated too long. His skin split along the jawline, the same way he'd once described Kane doing, unzipping. Beneath, chitin shimmered wet and black. The transformation was fast. Bones snapping. Limbs elongating. But when he looked at me, something human still flickered. Run, Cole. I couldn't. I raised the gun, but the whisper in my head drowned the world. We are the same. My trigger finger froze. The barrel trembled. He lunged, but instead of striking, he crashed past me, tackling another figure emerging from the fog, a second hollow. They rolled into the firelight, a tangle of muscle and armor, biting, tearing, shrieking in stereo. I ran until the sound became wind. I stopped hours later on a ridge overlooking Black Hollow. Dawn bled across the treetops. Smoke rose from the valley like incense. My hands shook, but the wound on my arm was gone. Not even a scar. In my pocket, the vial still pulsed, steady, patient, alive. When the first sunbeam hit it, the whisper returned, clearer than before. Bloodline preserved. Next phase begins. I looked down at my reflection in the glass. My eyes flashed umber. The sign for the hollow mortal rose out of the mist like a bad memory, half its neon burned out, the remaining letters flickering between, low mott. Highway 22 was silent except for the hum of insects and the distant hiss of wet asphalt. I parked the truck behind the maintenance shed and killed the engine. Elijah's shotgun still lay across the seat where he'd dropped it, the metal streaked with soot. Beside it, the vial pulsed like a tiny heart. I told myself I was here for answers, not revenge. But when I stepped out into the cold, I already knew the difference didn't matter anymore. Room 609 was at the end of the upper deck, curtains drawn, a single light bleeding through. I could smell gasoline before I reached the door. My pulse synced to the glow in my pocket, the seed responding, eager. Inside, voices murmured behind the thin walls, chanting, mechanical, each syllable drawn out like the breath of machinery. The order of the hollow claw. They were waiting. I kicked in the door. The room was a mausoleum of rot and smoke. Raj Parikh's body was propped in a chair, throat slit, eyes open to nothing. Across from him, Sister Seraph knelt bound to a pipe, her mouth gagged with surgical gauze, eyes flickering in the dark like trapped fireflies. On the bed, a portable altar, the Order's symbol painted in blood. And behind it, 5 enforcers in bone masks turned as one. One raised a torch. "You carry the light," he said. "Return it." I tossed the vial onto the altar. It pulsed faster, sensing its skin. "You want it?" I said. "Come take it." They surged forward. I fired the Beowulf. The first round hit center mass, splattering black across the wall. The recoil slammed through my shoulder, but the pain vanished instantly, replaced by a white heat crawling through my veins. The blood inside me was waking. A second cultist lunged with a hooked blade. I caught the swing, twisted his arm until it snapped backward, and drove the barrel into his chest. The osmium slug tore him open, Another came from the side, female, quick, but I moved quicker, almost anticipating her strike before she made it. The world slowed. Every motion traced itself in silver light, every heartbeat in the room blooming like sonar. That's when I understood what Elijah meant by resonance. The hollow blood wasn't infection, it was communication. And now, I was fluent. I swept the floor lamp into the remaining torches. Flames leapt up the curtains. The mortal's oxygen turned to napalm. One of the cultists screamed as fire crawled under his mask, melting it into his skin. The smell of burning bone filled the air. Seraph struggled against her bindings, muffled screams mixing with the roar. I moved toward her, not to free her, but to see. She looked up, tears cutting clean lines through the soot on her face. "You killed my father," she hissed through the gag. "He killed himself the day he joined them," I said. Something changed in her then, hatred folding into revelation. "You don't understand. You were meant to finish what he started. You are the bridge." The seed in my pocket pulsed violently, light bursting through the fabric like a flare. The room shook. Cracks spidered through the ceiling. Seraph smiled through the fire. "It's choosing." The floor collapsed. We fell through into the lower level, an old laundry room turned ritual chamber. The altar smashed beside us. The vial shattered. The seed rolled free, still glowing, still alive. I crawled for it. So did she. When our hands met over it, the light exploded, white, then red, then something deeper. The world dissolved. Inside the light. There was no sound, no time, only a current. I saw arteries stretching across continents, roots binding men and machines, surgeons slicing into creation itself. Every face blurred into the next, Cain, Elijah, Raj, me, variations of the same design. Then her voice, "This is the new anatomy." And his, "No, this is hunger." The light tore itself apart. I woke on concrete. The fire had spread through the ceiling, raining embers. Seraph lay beside me, her pulse erratic, skin flickering between human and something glassy. "It's inside both of us now," she whispered. Father was right, bloodline and faith, united. Her jaw cracked. Teeth elongated. I leveled the pistol. "Don't," she said. "Kill me, and it'll need you alone. Let me share it." For a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. Then I saw Elijah's face behind my eyelids, burning in the cabin, whispering, "Don't let it win." I fired. Once. Twice. She fell back against the wall, golden light leaking from the wounds like molten wax. The glow dimmed, then faded. I turned to the seed, it pulsed faintly, smaller now, like a dying ember. I picked it up. My skin didn't burn this time. It merged. Lines of light crawled up my wrist, mapping veins like circuitry. The mortal groaned. The fire reached the fuel tanks outside. I had seconds. I limped toward the door, dragging Raj's body away from the flames. Don't ask me why, maybe some instinct that still remembered decency. Outside, night bled into dawn. The fog glowed orange from the inferno. I stopped by the road, watching the building collapse inward. The seed inside my chest pulsed once, synchronized with the explosion. The blast tore through the mortal, a single bloom of light devouring everything. Ash rained down like snow. I should have died there. But the blast only staggered me. The heat rolled across my skin, blistering and then healing in the same breath. The whisper inside wasn't a voice anymore, it was mine. Adaptation complete. I turned back toward the forest. The pines swayed as if bowing. Every living thing around me resonated, roots, insects, blood in the soil, all connected, all speaking through pulse. In the distance, sirens wailed from the highway. Human sounds. Irrelevant now. I thought of Elijah's final words, "The hunt is a family business." Maybe he was right. Maybe the line between hunter and hollow was never a line, just a mirror. I took one last look at the burning mortal, then started walking east, toward the timberline and the rising sun. The light followed. Epilogue, New Bloodline. Weeks later, in Portland, an anonymous donor funded the reopening of Iron Pine Research Institute. Mission statement, genetic regeneration through metamorphic cells. Primary Director, Dr. C. McAllister. Security footage from the night shift shows the director entering the subbasement at 2:14 a.m., alone. His eyes reflect umber in the lens. Moments later, the lights flicker across the entire building, then stabilize. A single line appears on the access terminal. Some family trees have roots in hell. Ours just learned to bite back.